Hey, in this video, we're going to be talking about how to use Anvil with Foundry to do local development and connect it to a front end. So let's take a look at a very simple smart contract, test suite, and deployment script, and how we can deploy that on Anvil and then connect that to a front end using Svelte. So here we have a basic hello world contract. It's about as simple as you can get. We have our contract, hello world. It's going to start with a public greeting of hello world. We'll keep track of the iterations, how many times we've changed it, just so we can see that changing. And then we have our set greeting, where we increment our iteration and also set our new greeting. So we can change what the message is. Let's take a look at the test suite. This test suite is pretty basic because our contract is pretty basic. We have a setup here where we set up our hello world, store it in hello, and then we have a test for the greeting that just asserts that our hello.greeting is equal to hello world. That's what our default is when we first set this up. So our greeting is equal to hello world. We also test to make sure that we can set our greeting, that we can change it. We'll change it to hello test. And then we'll make sure through an assert equals that it's equal to hello test. And then finally, we have our test iteration just to make sure that iteration counter is updating as we go through this. So that's pretty basic. Our test suite is there. Let's go ahead and just make sure that it works. If I take a look here, I can run forge test, and that will run our test suite after it compiles everything that it needs to. You can see our 3 tests run successfully. Cool, our smart contract works. This is a very basic smart contract, like I mentioned. We'll keep it simple. And lastly, we have our hello.s.sol. This is going to be the script that we'll use to deploy our smart contract. Again, this is a very basic script. You can see here, it just has hello world as an instance of hello world contract. And then we have our function run that's going to create a new instance of that when we call this script. So those are the 3 files that we'll be using here. We have our contract, our tests, and our script to deploy everything. From here, how do we do this? How do we deploy this locally? Well, Foundry comes with this awesome tool called Anvil, and Anvil creates a local testnet node that you can then use for development purposes. So how do we use Anvil? Well, let's check it out. We'll open up a new terminal here, and we'll just say Anvil. Once you have Foundry installed, Anvil comes with it. It's awesome. It gives you a bunch of information when you run Anvil. So let's check out what all we have here. The first thing we see is that we have 10 different accounts that are available to us and already got funds in them. So for local development purposes, that's awesome. We have 10 different accounts that we can interact with. Sweet. We have the private keys for those accounts. Now, normally you'd freak out if you saw private keys on a stream like this, right? You'd be like, oh no. It's terrible. But again, these are just for local testnet, so they're fine. They're going to be thrown away. Anytime I shut down Anvil, the entire state of this testnet chain will disappear. So that's not something to worry about. We have the mnemonic to create our wallet. We have information about the chain, such as the chain ID and that kind of information. And then we can see that it's listening on localhost port 8545. The first piece of information that we're going to need from this screen is this private key. So we'll go ahead and just copy this information. We'll go to a new terminal window and we'll need to leave Anvil running. So it's kind of like if you have a front end running, you're going to have like your npm run dev. This is just like that. Anvil needs to run so that that node stays up for our testnet that's running on our local machine. When it comes to our private key, I am going to run export private key and I'll paste in the value there. Again, I wouldn't normally store my private key in a variable like this in my shell. I just don't think that's secure. Check out my other video about using 1Password to do this in a much more secure manner. But in this case, given the nature of this private key, it's fine. So we'll go ahead and export that. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to run forge script. We'll call our hello.s.sol script and we'll call the contract of hello script in there. The URL that we're going to be using is our localhost 8545. Remember, that's going to be that Anvil instance that we have. We have our private key and we'll broadcast this information. So when we press return here, you'll notice it goes through some compiling if it needs to do that. And we get a bunch of information here about the chain that was used, how much gas was spent, the fact that our contract was deployed. Here's the contract address, how much it cost. And we can check out our Anvil instance. And if we scroll down, we can see a lot of stuff happened here. We have transactions, we have all sorts of information happening here all of a sudden. Here's our actual transaction where our contract was created. So that contract of AA3 is the same contract here. So that is our contract being deployed on this local Anvil node. Awesome. So at this point, it's deployed, it's ready to go. We can interact with it using Anvil. So here, there is a Foundry command called cast. We can use that to call our contract. One thing that we'll need to do though is we'll need to set up this environment variable for our contract address. So we'll set that, and now we can call cast call, and we can get the string. So this is the hello world, right? That's what we set in our contract originally, is our greeting is hello world. Now, if we wanted to change that to something a little bit different than just hello world, we can use cast send. Again, we're passing in our contract address. We're using the set greeting function. So that's going to be this function from our contract here to set the greeting. And we're going to pass in a string. That string is going to be howdy y'all. And we're passing in our private key as well. This is going to let us use that first account to actually make this call. So here we do that, and you'll notice, whew, that's a lot of information all of a sudden, right? But this is the transaction. This is going to show us all the information for that transaction. If you take a look at Anvil, you'll notice that we have a new transaction here with the information about that. So this is pretty powerful. It's pretty cool. We can do things from the command line here. If we take a look at the greeting now, we can see it's howdy y'all. Now, if I wanted to develop a full blockchain application with a front end attached to this, how would I go about doing that, right? We have Anvil running. We have this thing running locally on our computer. How do we go about making this, connecting it to a front end? Well, the way that we do that with Anvil running, the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to import that private key into our MetaMask wallet. So if I scroll up here, I'll grab the private key again. From here, I'll head to Chrome. I'll go into MetaMask, and this is a new MetaMask instance that I set up. It doesn't have anything in it, so let's go ahead and add an account. We'll import an account with their private key. Import it, and you can see here it says I have 0 ETH, right? But when we looked here, it said that everything had 1,000 ETH. And that's because we're on the wrong network. We don't have that network established for Anvil yet. It looks like we need to add a network to MetaMask as well for Anvil. So I don't think the Anvil is in here. No, we can't find it there. So we'll need to add a network manually. We can see here that our chain ID is 31. We'll add it in here. We'll call this Anvil for the network name. The RPC URL is localhost:8545. The chain ID, the currency symbol is ETH. And we'll click save. So we'll switch to Anvil, and you'll see that we have now 10,000 ETH. From here, we'll switch gears from Foundry into Svelte. So I use Svelte for the front end. I really enjoy creating applications in Svelte. To me, it's really simple and straightforward. Let's walk through a few things that you'll need to set up before we take a look at how to connect it to that front end. This is the application binary interface for the file. It basically tells your front end how to interact with the file. You'll also need the client.ts. So here we have that. We import a few things from VM as well as Anvil, that chain that we're going to be using. We have our connect wallet client function. That's going to be the client for the actual wallet, like MetaMask itself. We check to make sure that we have it installed in our window.ethereum. Then we declare the client itself, where we create that wallet client using the chain and the information above from window.ethereum. We create a separate connection as well using the public client. That's going to let us read from that without connecting our wallet. And we'll see where that's used in just a moment. When we take a look at the contract interactions file under lib, we can see that we're importing in those two wallet connections, and we're importing in some more information from VM for get contract and the Anvil chain, as well as our ABI. So this is going to let us actually interact with that contract. We're going to do two separate things. We're going to read from the contract. We're also going to change that greeting. So we have our constant for our contract address hard-coded in here. This is going to be the one that we deployed. One of the nice things about Anvil is this is the first thing that you do on Anvil. It's going to be the same address every time. So that's something you can just leave in there for your local development. We have our contract. We're going to create it with the address, the ABI, our client, which is the public client for reading from it. And then we have our get greeting function here. So what this is going to do is it's going to read that greeting from the contract. It's also going to read the iteration and return those two values back. So we'll return the message and the iteration. So that's for getting the greeting. We have another function, set greeting. This one's a little bit more involved. This one's going to use the wallet address. So it's going to go ahead and make sure that we're connected to that wallet. Then it's going to simulate the request. So what this does is it uses the public client to say, hey, I'm going to pretend that I'm going to do this request. Make sure that everything is set up correctly for the request, get all the information I need, and that creates this request object. Then we can pass to our actual wallet. Before we do that, though, we make sure that we're on the correct chain, Anvil in this case. If not, we switch to it, and then we wait for that contract write to happen with the request. And we're passing in a message. So where does that message come from? If we take a look at routes, page.svelte, we'll see here our Svelte page. It's just one page. I kept things as simple as I could. And I will tell you right now, the formatting is pretty sparse. But let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So we've got our import on mount. So when this mounts, we're going to run something. We get our get greeting and set greeting from our contract interactions. We set up a few variables, and then on mount, we're going to go ahead and set the message and iteration with that get greeting that we looked at just a moment ago. We have a function here to update the greeting as well. We'll go ahead and use that set greeting that we created a little bit ago, and then we'll update the message and iteration with get greeting after that's successful. And that's all in the script tag at the top of the Svelte file. Underneath, we display our greeting, the iteration number, and then we have an input for our update message. And that is it. So in the third terminal window here, I'm going to go ahead and just run npm run dev to kick off the Svelte server. You can see it's running on localhost 5173. If we take a look now, we can see our greeting is number 1. So we've had one iteration already. It's howdy y'all. If we change it to something else like hi, and we click update greeting, you'll notice the first thing that's going to happen is going to ask us to connect to this. We have account 1 and account 2. Account 2 is the one that we imported. So we'll connect that account. Confirm this. On Anvil, it's asking us if we're sure that we want to do this. We'll confirm, and we can see that our greeting has changed. If we want to check and make sure that everything is working, we can go back to our terminal here, and we can call greeting again and see that it has changed as well. So that's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. We can use Anvil for local development. We can connect it to our front end and do a full application with a front end and a smart contract as the back end using Anvil. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Feel free to drop a comment down below. What do you want me to make a video about next? I'm open to your input. I want to make things that are interesting to you. So drop that down in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.